13 others. The strikes hit multiple locations, including energy and infrastructure sites. Officials have said residential buildings and a kindergarten were damaged as well. These have sparked several fires across the city. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Svyrydenko has posted on X saying that Russia is trying to create a humanitarian catastrophe as the winter approaches. She has called the attack a deliberate act of terror against civilians. Svyrydenko has also praised emergency workers for their quick response and urged allies to provide stronger air defense systems to protect Ukrainian cities. Ukraine's Foreign Ministry Andriy Sybiha said that Russian strikes also targeted the energy grid, railways, and homes in Dnipro, Kharkiv, and Sumy. On the other hand, Russia's defense ministry has claimed the attacks were aimed at Ukraine's military and energy facilities. It also said Russian forces shot down 121 Ukrainian drones overnight, including 7 headed towards Moscow. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert, joins us live from St. Petersburg. Thank you very much, Gilbert, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, today we saw comments coming in from Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev. He said that the United States, Russia, and Ukraine were quite close to a diplomatic solution to end the Russia-Ukraine war. But we see all these escalations from both sides as Russian strikes hit Kyiv, and Kyiv was targeting Russia's capital, Moscow. So how do you analyze this current situation of Russia and Ukraine? And is there any chance of trilateral or bilateral talks?
Mr. Dmitriev is in the United States now on a mission to discuss trade prospects. And he is suggesting that there is a path towards negotiated settlement and that there will be very big business between the United States and Russia. I understand this position. It's an official government position of Russia, but I don't believe it for a minute. Mr. Dmitriev is a very smart, very capable, and I should say very ambitious person who is doing the bidding of the president of the Russian Federation. And this trip is symbolic. Its actual content is, to my understanding, close to zero. I think it is very unfortunate that this trip is proceeding just days after Mr. Trump has imposed what are hoped, from Washington's perspective, to be crushing sanctions on Russia's oil trade, and particularly on its trade in oil with India, because India is, together with China, the largest consumer today of Russian oil. And whereas China is fairly safeguarded from Trump's sanctions, and whereas China receives almost all of its oil from pipelines, which are untouchable by American sanctions, India receives it all by ships. And it's seaborne oil that the sanctions are going to hit. So in this light of this very severe sanction, it is surprising that Mr. Dmitriev is in the United States at all. I am dumbfounded.
Yes, building on that, why do you think, what does this timing suggest of this statements?
Well, I think it is a very bad indication of the way the Russian administration is reading Mr. Trump and what comes next. It's surprising that they're forgetting what happened in December of 2016, soon after the election of Trump to his first mandate, when Mr. Obama gave a poison chalice to the incoming president by confiscating Russian diplomatic properties in the United States. And the Russians didn't respond. Mr. Putin didn't respond. He hoped that still then, in 2016, going into 2017, that good relations would be established. But we know what happened. Mr. Trump proceeded to introduce a vast number of sanctions on Russia, and he proved himself in his first term to be no friend of Russia. I am dumbfounded that that lesson from the past is being forgotten or ignored at the present, because the imposition of these sanctions is like the confiscation of the diplomatic missions in 2016. And here again, we see no proper response from Russia. Instead, it turns the other cheek and sends Mr. Dmitriev on a fool's errand to talk about big business opportunities in the future. I do not understand the strange behavior of the Russian government today.
And building on that, what are the potential implications? As you've mentioned, it's very questionable, but Russia did state that Russia and the United States are maintaining dialogue on issues beyond Ukraine. What could that be?
Well, there are many issues that they have in common. Their activities in the United Nations are, to a certain extent, coordinated today on areas of common interest. There is, of course, coordination on how to deal with the Gaza settlement, because Russia is also an interested party in everything that happens in the Middle East. The Middle East is much closer to the Russian Federation than it is to the United States. So there are subjects that they are discussing, some of which will be constructive, but the major issue between the United States and Russia is destructive, not constructive. And Mr. Putin, in the last several days, explained how he would be tough and he would give a determined and shocking response if the United States sent tomahawks to Kyiv. Well, that was looking brave about a situation that's already been resolved. The United States is not sending any tomahawks to Russia. But when it comes to the question of the challenges that Mr. Trump has just imposed by the latest sanctions, Mr. Putin is doing nothing and saying nothing. Now, these sanctions, let me be very specific what we're talking about. If India does not fulfill or carry on its present level of purchases of oil, that will create a 10% hole in the Russian state budget. That is a severe loss of income. And Mr. Putin is pretending that it's nothing. He's pretending that it doesn't exist. That is not the way to deal with this issue.
What do you think? Should India consider providing technology or defense assistance to Ukraine, or maintain a neutral position to protect its strategic partnership with Russia on this matter?
Well, if India were to extend defense equipment and technology to Ukraine, that would ruin BRICS. Let's just be very open about it. India has nothing like that in the plans. The damage that India would do to Russia is if it decided, and this is a reasonable thing to do, that Mr. Trump's sanctions and tariffs on India are too expensive to accept, and that although Russian oil is being sold cheaply, it is not being sold cheaply enough to compensate India for the losses that Trump is imposing. So there you have the critical issue before India. It is not going against Russia, but it is whether or not India submits to the diktat of Washington and curtails or stops completely its purchases of Russian oil. You know, as I know, that your single largest importer of Russian oil, I think the company is called Reliance, has just stated publicly that it will no longer buy Russian oil. So I imagine that the Indian government representatives and Russian representatives are talking furiously now to find a workaround so that some imports of Russian oil will continue despite the sanctions.
And how, now bringing EU to conversation, how do you analyze European nations' perspective? Do you think they are discouraging direct US-Russia communication, or they're encouraging direct US-Russia communication?
Well, they're working against any communications. The majority of European Union member states, and by majority I mean 24 out of the 27 member states, because 3 member states, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and Hungary, are in opposition to the others. But the others all want a continuation of the war. They find this advantageous to punish Russia and to keep it distracted by the Ukraine, while they proceed to invest a vast amount of money in remilitarization, meaning restoring and raising the production levels of European arms manufacturers and allotting money for the training and salaries of enlarged armies. Germany
Yes.
wants to expand its army by about 40 to 50%. That takes a lot of money, a lot of training, and it'll take some time. So they all want to keep Russia busy for the next 3 or 4 years while they prepare themselves for a 2029 attack on Russia. That is where they stand. The European countries in the European Union are predominantly hawkish, warlike, and anti-Russian. That is the present leadership today.
Wow, thank you for sharing that insight, Gilbert. Dr. O, please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, the European Union is developing a new plan to curb its reliance on Chinese critical raw materials. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has criticized Beijing for its expanded restrictions on the export of rare earths. The European Union has for years attempted to reduce its dependence on China for the minerals that are needed for the transition to cleaner energy, the defense sector, and electric vehicle production as well. Now, Ursula von der Leyen has also stated that the EU would seek to speed up critical raw materials partnerships with countries such as Australia, Canada, Chile, Greenland, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Ukraine. The plan would also include greater efforts to recycle critical raw materials in products sold in Europe. This comes in response to China's export restrictions on rare earths and battery materials, which were imposed on 9th October. Now for this discussion, we go back to Gilbert. Dr. O, he's a Russia affairs expert, joins us live from St. Petersburg. Thank you very much, Gilbert, for staying with us. Now, how can EU's efforts to reduce dependence on Chinese critical raw materials reshape global trade dynamics for them and their strategic partnership and their strategy moving forward? And is this feasible in short term? How long will it take for them to change this, replace China with another countries?
Well, you put your finger on the critical issue. It's time. They can make arrangements with Australia and Canada and all kinds of countries, but there is no rare earth production going on of any significant amount outside of China. Because it is a dirty business, that is to say, it is a polluting business, which all of the very ecologically proper nations of the earth have avoided. China picked it up, and China became, by default, not by intent, but I stress, by default, the world's largest producer and almost monopoly producer and processor. You can dig this stuff up, but you have to know how to refine it. And you have to do this in an ecologically acceptable way, which is not easy. Accordingly, it'll take years. And von der Leyen's statement about how they intend to get around the Chinese limitations, my goodness, Europe is lucky that the Chinese are selling 1 ounce of these metals to them altogether, given the hostility of European policies towards China. The United States, of course, is more active, but look what has happened. And if you want to consider the real negotiating strength of Europe in this issue, look at the United States. Mr. Trump threatened China with the most drastic, dire sanctions, 150% tariffs and so on. And where is that now? Nowhere. Because the Chinese said, gentlemen, you pursue this and you won't get a gram of our metals. And if you don't have that, Western industrial production of high technology products collapses, not 6 years from now, but next week. Therefore, the Americans learned to their regret that the Chinese have leverage over the Americans. And if they have leverage over the Americans, where Mr. Trump is the world's biggest bully and biggest loudmouth, then they sure have leverage over the European Union. And Madame von der Leyen is whistling in the dark.
With that, I would like to thank Gilbert Doctorow for joining us and sharing that insight and staying with us throughout this news. Now we move on. Ivorians went to the polls with incumbent Alassane Ouattara, seeking what he has hinted may be his final term. The 83-year-old credited his nearly 15 years in office with delivering economic growth and relative stability in the West African nation. Ouattara faces a field that includes 2 former government ministers, as well as the ex-wife and former spokesperson of his predecessor, Laurent Gbagbo. The incumbent, backed by a strong political party, enters the race as the clear favorite. Ouattara, a former international banker and a deputy managing director of the International Monetary Fund, came to power in 2011 following a 4-month civil war that claimed around 3,000 people's lives, triggered by Gbagbo's refusal to accept defeat in the 2010 election. This year, both Gbagbo and former Credit Suisse CEO Tidjane Thiam were declared ineligible, leaving Ouattara with a decisive advantage in the vote. Now we move on to Asia. In Vietnam's capital city, Hanoi, more than 60 countries have signed the first UN treaty aimed at tackling cybercrime, which is a growing threat that costs the global economy trillions of dollars each year. The treaty comes despite opposition from an unlikely band of tech companies and human rights groups who warn it could expand state surveillance. Now, this new global legal framework seeks to strengthen international cooperation to fight digital crimes ranging from child pornography to transnational cyber scams and also money laundering. Speaking at the signing ceremony, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called the Hanoi Treaty an important milestone, but has said that it is only the beginning of global efforts to build stronger collective defenses against cybercrime. Let's listen into what more he has said about the landmark agreement.
Over the years, cyberspace has become fertile ground for criminals, giving them unprecedented reach and the ability to move at speeds unimaginable just a decade ago. Every day, sophisticated scams defraud families, steal livelihoods, and drain billions of dollars from our economies. Let us seize this moment and maximize the potential of this landmark agreement. Let us build a cyberspace that respects everyone's dignity and human rights. And let us ensure that the digital age delivers peace, security, and prosperity for all.